Yo, what's going on, guys? We had a brand new episode of Buy or Bust today. We're going to be talking about Victoria Hand, some key synergies, 3 decks for you guys, as well as my final verdict at the end of the video. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So Victoria Hand is the brand new Series 5 card that is releasing on Tuesday with Iron Patriot, but this card is going to be in Spotlights and has the ability, ongoing, your cards that were created in your hand have +2 power. What all does that mean? That means cards that have been generated from like a Kate Bishop, from a Moon Girl, from the Hood, Agent 13, Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, etc. Those type of cards that are generated, even like a Mirage, are going to get +2 power on the board as an ongoing ability. In your hand, I believe they also will have that +2 power, but in order for that to happen, a Victoria Hand has to be on the board itself. But let's talk about some key synergies that come with Victoria Hand as well. The first couple cards that come to mind are going to be Moon Girl, because you're adding duplication of these cards. These cards are generated in your hand, so they should get the Victoria Hand value. We're thinking about Quinjet, because cards that are generated are going to be able to work with Quinjet, because cards that did not start in your deck get them -1 cost with Quinjet. And then I'm thinking the Hood as well. Those demons will, instead of being a 1/6, will be a 1/8 with Victoria Hand, which can be very viable to you as well. But of course, there's got to be some counters for this card as well. First counter I thought of was Red Guardian. Like I was saying in the last video as well, Red Guardian is very prevalent in the meta right now and can target Victoria Hand since she only has 3 power herself. So of course, this is definitely going to be one of the main targets. You also have Rogue, because she's ongoing. She can be hit by a Rogue as well, or an Enchantress, because Enchantress is also able to offset the ability too. With that in mind, the good with this card is that this is actually a global ongoing. It is a 2 cost where all the cards in your hand that are generated to get this, it's kind of like Ravonna. It also is global, meaning on the board, they're going to have that +2 power as well. So instead of it just having to be a single lane ongoing, like a Jean Grey or even like a Captain America or an Iron Man, this is a global ongoing for any of the cards that on the board that were generated in your hand. This card also has a strong ability, +2. May not be +3, but I still think with it being global, it does make this pretty strong. It is going to be a little niche, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I do think at a 2 cost as well, I think it's easy to play late game or on curve. I would suggest playing this card later in the game, which Guest was talking about on the Snapcast this week, which I think was incredibly smart. If you play her later in the game, your opponents are not expecting that power. And also, it allows you to just steal cubes that way, and it's less likely that she's going to be targeted by a Red Guardian, a Rogue, or an Enchantress, or something to offset what she's doing. Playing it later in the game protects your extra power there at the very end. And I think it adds another layer of unpredictability to the card generators. Do they have Victoria Hand in their hand? Are they going to be able to capitalize in that sense with those cards on the board? What do they generate? I think that's the extra layer I'm referring to there. But of course, with the good, there comes the bad, which I think Red Guardian is really relevant in the meta, like we were saying originally in yesterday's video. I think this card's everywhere. So like the Red Guardian interaction, of course, removes the ability or removes the text of the card that it hits, and it would remove the ongoing ability of the +2 to the generated cards. You have to have generated cards in your hand to be able to use Victoria Hand. If you don't have any generators, she's just a 2/3. She just doesn't do anything, ongoing or not, just there. So keep that in mind. It's a little niche, like I was saying. Also, to go with the card generators, you have to have generated cards. I don't know if it works with Erishim or Thanos at the moment, because those cards are generated in your deck opposed to in your hand. So not entirely sure what that is. I would assume it doesn't work that way, but of course, until the card comes out, I don't think we can truly test that. And then hand space can be an issue too. If you are trying to generate a bunch of cards as possible, you may not be able to get your draws later in the game as well. Just keeping that in mind as you're using a Moon Girl, or you're using a Kate Bishop, or even you're bouncing stuff back and forth to generate more cards. Just keep that in mind prospectively. But let's talk about the floor and the ceiling for this card as well. So on the high end over here, you have Victoria Hand. You play around curve or at the end of the game, and you have generated cards you can play that also get the +2 power. So you have that value of Victoria Hand. That is best case scenario. I think that's going to be that there. And then you also have low end. You have no generated cards. You played at the end of the game, and she's just a 2/3. You just have 2/3 power on the board there. So just keeping that in mind. But let's talk about a couple of these decks that we have made over here. So the very first deck I have is going to be a bouncing Hitmonkey list. You have your card generators with the Hood, with Kate Bishop, and you also have Nico have the chance to be able to generate cards. You have Black Swan to be able to help with your slam. So not a whole lot of generators, but if you think about this prospectively, you at least have one with the Hood. You at least have two with Kate Bishop. If you bounce these cards as well, you could get another Demon, which would be another generator for the Hood. Potentially could get more generators for Kate Bishop too to maximize your Victoria hand. You also have Black Swan in order to play these 1-drops for free at the end of the game with a Hitmonkey. The next list we have is going to be a mid-range kind of hand buff. This is where we're tying more into cards you're generating in your hand, whether that is a Snow Guard, whether that is a Mirage, because it adds a copy of your opponent's card. So that would be generated opposed to a Cable. Cable doesn't generate a card, it steals a card. So I do not believe Cable works the same way. I totally could be wrong because I haven't seen it in action. You also have Agent Coulson. You have Devil Dino, some old school Devil Dino. You have Tech with Red Guardian, your US Agent, Shang-Chi, so you have some of those counters to your opponents as well. And then I have a just kind of net deck. I've been playing a lot of just Hitmonkey Slam, and so this ties more into the Moon Girl interaction there to be able to duplicate either your 1-drops or even like a Hitmonkey or a She-Hulk. And if you do have your Victoria hand on the board, all those cards are going to get +2. This is going to be way more niche, and you have to have the Moon Girl in order for this to really function the way you want it to, but this definitely has the potential to pop off. And speaking of Kate Bishop, we actually have Kate Bishops in spotlights this week with the Victoria hand and Grandmaster. This is going to be 2 Series 5 cards with Victoria hand and Kate Bishop. Grandmaster is now Series 4, but all in all, like, this week seems like a pretty decent week to open if you don't have Grandmaster. Grandmaster is more flexible now than he was before. Kate Bishop still, I think, is a very flexible card. Victoria hand might be a little bit niche. That's why this is not a 5-star flexibility week. But I think when it comes to Kate Bishop, when it comes to Grandmaster, those are cards that you can flex into a bunch of different shells, actually. So I think the value there is solid. It's a good week to open if you're missing Kate Bishop or Grandmaster. I think Victoria hand's going to be pretty decent. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. But I think this is a pretty solid week to open. The variants are also great. I like the Kate Bishop. I like the coloring on it. The Grandmaster, the animation, I want to see how the orbs look on him. And then the Victoria hand looks awesome. She's got a freaking huge gun, by the way. Holy moly. But great variants there as well. Now, talking about Victoria hand a little bit more, comparing what I've seen the community talk about Victoria hand, we think she's going to be pretty strong. I think she's not going to be as flexible, so the flexibility on that last slide is more pertaining to like Kate Bishop and Grandmaster tying in some Victoria hand as well. I don't think she gets adjusted. The community doesn't really think she's get adjusted. She's got a good ability, but it's nothing overwhelming just yet. Of course, this is before the card is released. We think it is good, but we're not sure that it's going to be like overpowered, we would say. And I'd say I'm pretty on the same page with it. I think this could be a little bit more flexible. I don't think you have to have a bunch of, hand generating enablers to be able to get Victoria hand to work. I think even just a couple work well. I mean, you've seen some of the lists we created here too. They don't have to be in a large, like not every other card has to be a generator to get the value. Just being able to, I think, play her late game is, I think, what makes her better. And she plays also with the season pass card, which is nice, so they can go hand in hand the first week. I do think this is a snap. I do think it's a buy. I do think it's something you should go for. So I think it's a good investment. I think especially if you're missing Kate Bishop, it's a really good week to open. In that sense, Grandmaster, if you're missing Grandmaster. Of course, I'm not the hugest fan of opening on weeks where you have a Series 4 card with 2 Series 5 cards. Of course, the best weeks to open is with 3 Series 5 cards. But I do think even if you get Grandmaster and Kate Bishop and you don't get Victoria hand, it is a great week to open, and I think this is a decent card to open for, and I think it will get better with Bullseye. What Guest was talking about, the Snapcast was so much fun. Being on the Snapcast, talking about the new cards, I think you can get some value there with Swarms potentially. Just keep that in mind. But I think this is going to be a pretty solid card. Overall, it's going to work well. But as always, definitely keep in mind that you should wait a couple days, especially if you're low in resources. I could be wrong about cards. The community can be wrong about cards. It happens all the time. We don't know how they work, hand in hand in game. And then we also want to keep in mind resources are scarce. We're not having an abundance of resources. We don't know when we're going to get any card acquisition updates. So just keeping that in mind prospectively, just manage your resources the best way you can. Wait a couple days. Good cards get nerfed. Bad cards get buffed more often than not. It just really depends. But I want to say thank you again so much for watching the video. If you guys did appreciate it, definitely feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Until the next time, you guys have a good one. God bless, and Tucker out.